things as well. Okay, so welcome to the Grunge lecture, the last lecture for today. So what we want to look at is how images is used in Grunge. How do we use images in Grunge? I'm just going to give you the very broad outline of Grunge. So the key thing that and I'm just going to go back again, what we've learned is, we've always learned about the classic style. Now we're learning about the grunge style. And we're also going to be doing 3 lectures on pop art. The pop art style. Okay? Now I just remember, I don't want to oversimplify things, but I'm oversimplifying now. Just to oversimplify it. So if you're thinking of classic design, you will always think of classic design as, when you look at classic design, remember any design, all 3 designs, you are keeping in mind the circle that I always do. You're always keeping in mind text, you're keeping in mind the image, you're keeping in mind the background, and you're keeping in mind the color, right? So in all cases, you are focusing on those things. But if you take a very classic design, how does a classic design treat text? The key thing about classic design, the way classic design treats your headline and your body copy, is they will tend to keep it, the alignment, they will be very symmetrical, or they will keep the alignment either to the left or either to the right. But you will see order. Classic design, there is order. In other words, the communication and the message must be easily noticeable. So the message mustn't be complicated. There's nice order. I can see where my headline is. I can see, and if there's an image, then the image will be on either in the whole background. It will be as a background, and the image, whatever that image is related to the text. So when you talk about symmetry, if they've got a width and a height in their layout, you could have the symmetry being left and right. So the text could be on the right and the image could be on the left. Or the image could be in the middle and the text could run through the bottom and the top, and it depends where they place it. But when it comes to the image, they usually, if you think about the image, it's either going to be a picture inside the space of the background, and mostly they might not even give the background a color. The way they treat the color in classic is they might just leave it empty. They might not even give it a color. But they want to put the headline either just on top of the picture or just at the bottom of the picture, so that it's closely related. And it's usually from the middle up that the headline and the picture is seen. And then the rest of it is there. And you will also notice that more and more footers are being brought into classic design. And what goes in the footer? It's usually the website address, telephone numbers, logos at the bottom right here. That's usually why they use the footer. So I look at designs and posters and I ask myself, why don't they put the small print and have the website address and the Facebook link, or the social media links there? That's an ideal place to put all those extra things. Okay? Right, so that's classic. And then remember the 80-20 rule. Look for the 80-20 rule. So we're looking at the picture, and the picture either bleeds or the picture is in the top, or it'll either bleed out. Okay? And if the picture is over the whole image, then the picture, the background, then there's no background, then the picture will become part of the background. So let's say there's an ice cream, okay, or a milkshake, or food. Then let's say the burger becomes the picture, the main image, and the text is there, and that could have been on a plate or on a tablecloth, or part of the background could have been in there. It might not have been a cutout. Okay? And then sometimes they can use, as a background, they might use a transparency background. but not very noticeable. So that's sort of classic. Okay? And usually we can spot the 80-20 by everything is symmetrical, but when we start looking at the color, you'll see that they might bring in a second color. When we look at the background, we might see they might have no color background. If we look at the classic on the image, we'll see there's no bleed. Or they might have a bleed on top. Or the whole picture could be bleeding, but the main image is somewhere near where the heading is. That's classic in color, image, and text. Very simplified. Now, if you go over to Grunge and you want to look at text, image, color, background, here the key word is order. In Grunge, what is the key word? Yes, but it's really texture. In a grunge work, you will usually see texture. That's the key thing about grunge is texture. Even if you type in grunge images, you're going to get a texture type of image or a texture wallpaper. It's really about texture. Now, when you think about texture, especially in grunge, and you think about the background being texture, the image could be texture, or even the heading or the wording could be in texture. But it's like when you are looking at earthy colors even, then you could, and some texture in it, then it lends itself to grunge. So the key thing about grunge is not the order, not seeing the message clearly, but seeing the texture. The first thing that is noticed about is the texture. Now you can start saying, yeah, but with the texture you're getting a feel of emotion. There's some emotion response, or this emotion can also be interpreted as some energy response. There is some response to it. It's not like it's like order. Here we had the key word as always being harmony. We want to create harmony, marriage between the heading and the picture. I always talk about that. Is there a marriage between the heading and the picture? And they mustn't clash. The texture must be a little bit more dominant than the picture, but they mustn't clash. They must work in a harmony, and you must have this feeling of, I get the message, and it's nice and it's easy. It's harmony. Whereas when there's something about texture, it's something about a bit of energy, a bit of emotion, something a little bit different. It's not so much about harmony, because now you can place, the picture gets placed off-centered and things change on grunge. And the key thing immediately noticeable about the picture and the image is that it tends to be that the image is not cropped like a normal image is cropped. A normal image, if you want to take a picture of the burger, you'll have nothing else disturbing the background. Maybe a nice tablecloth or whatever, but there's not going to be cool drink and things. But whereas if you take grunge, the picture, that might be the focus of the picture here. But something else could be in the background also showing. So the way they crop the picture is, it's the way they crop the picture. They can crop a close-up of the picture, or they can blur the background of the picture. It's not as if the picture is like taken by a photography studio. Classic is, I want to take, if I'm doing a design about a gym, I want it classical. I want them, the woman and the girl are lined up and being posed as if they are in harmony. But when I'm doing something grunge and I'm doing a gym, then I want to say that my message must be sweaty, tough, extreme sport. So grunge tends to depend on the subject matter. So when it comes to sport, it will be the extreme sports. If it comes to music, it will be the rock or underground or the heavy metal music. It won't be the typical pop music or the typical guy being just a singer. Okay? So that lends itself to grunge and textures. Now you can even see it in the subject matter, even in classical subject matter if you want to do a design. So let's say I'm going to do a design for a sofa. So it depends. Now if the sofa is this rough material, we can use a close-up of it, and then I can start bringing in a grunge on the sofa. But if it's going to be smooth material, I don't want to bring the grunge effect into this ad. Now, even with now, when I was in one city, I noticed there's a skincare place advertising skincare. You know, you can put it like a light machine thing against your skin and you can smooth the skin out. So you can have a model with smooth skin and advertise this thing that smooths out your skin. I don't know, some therapy or light therapy or whatever, and it can be classical. But now they're showing pictures of how it was before and after and what you can do with the machine. So the machine can be for old people that have got flecks or something, and it can be for parts of your skin like that that's rough or old. And now the pictures that they show to show you it's for rough skin, those pictures don't look nice. Wrinkle, hands, wrinkles, you see. So now, doesn't that... now why would you want to do it classic with these wrinkles? Now, wrinkles means texture. Bring in grunge in your design. Because it looks disturbing looking at crinkled people and then cut out of hands and things. Ideal to bring in a nice texture and to then bring in the laser technology as the person as a cutout maybe, because grunge also uses cutouts, crops and cutouts. How many times in your grunge posters did you see they cut out David Carson? They cut out the face. Or sometimes they off-balance the picture. They put him on the left and put him on the right. So in classic design, you won't really see cutting out or deep etching. You do see it, but not often do you see it. But in grunge, you see it very often that pictures are cut out. Okay? So start cutting out the picture or zooming in. If they were just zooming in onto the product and cutting out the product and bringing it closer, you can bring in some texture and you can make the design better because of the subject matter. So why was David Carson famous? If he went to work for Rolling Stones, they would have fired him, because Rolling Stone is a classic magazine about musicians. But because his subject matter was grunge and heavy metal music, and it lent itself for that type of rebellious emotional energy design and textural design. And extreme sports like hang gliding and windsurfing and parachuting can lend itself to extreme and textures, okay? And cutouts, and people don't mind because they are in extremes. And for whoever the target market is, it will be appropriate. Okay, so that's grunge. So grunge, with the way that grunge handles the image is number one, texture. And pop art, you'll see, pop art is not about texture mostly. It's about drawings and color. It's about images that are drawings. And I don't like calling it drawings, but it's more like illustrations. It's when they use illustrations. So illustrations or drawings is what tends to make pop art, and then it's very colorful. And it's happy, vibrant, fun, colorful. So anything that's fun, colorful tends to be pop art. Alright, but now how do they teach, how do they treat the pictures in grunge? Now remember, when I talked about grunge, and I said to you, because text and pictures or text and images or text or photographs are very important, we spend a whole lecture just on the text part. But you've got to marry now the images with the text. And Ryan did a poster or project which you're also going to do. And when I briefed him on it, you remember, he got his image right, textured and everything, and grungy. But when he put in the text wasn't quite correct. And the way I showed it to him was, I said, just take off the image layer and just show me the text. And immediately you notice the text was just straightforward, classic style. You see, and then I said, okay, now just work on the text and then bring in the image. So remember, when you have an image or grunge style, the text could be so dominant that the picture could be normal, just a normal picture, but the texture and the text could turn it a lot into grunge. But there's always this 80-20 principle. So that design that you gave did work because 20% there wasn't a lot of text in it. We had very little copy. But what I'm trying to say is as well is, if you're going to bring grunge in, bring a lot of texture in, but try to bring the grunge style in both the image and both the text. So we've already discussed the options you can have for bringing it in the text from the previous video. So how would you make a headline? So let's talk about the headline. How would you make a headline grunge, or notice that the headline was done in grunge? Give me some examples.
It's texture.
Well, we've talked about everything is texture, right?
Okay.
So we're not going to focus on texture.
You distort like the writing, yeah, not like distort it, but like flip it. Like
I'm talking about now the headline. So let's have a headline and let's call it upfront grunge. Upfront grunge. Now, what I mean by the word upfront now is we're gonna look at grunge upfront now, or we're gonna look at the heading of grunge upfront now. We're gonna focus on it. How's the heading upfront grunge? Give me a way we're gonna treat that word upfront grunge as a heading. So the first thing we're looking at, size of the letters. So the size of the letters can vary. Right? The up front, the size could vary. The boldness could vary. Alright, so the size could vary. The size of the letters, where you place it. It could be placed on the next line as well. So when we talk about whether you're placing it on the next line or not the next line, we're talking then about as soon as you put something on a second line, you're immediately looking at the alignment of the two. If I put upfront grunge there, and it's classical, then it will be aligned, either to the left or in the center. But if it's grunge and it's aligned like that, then it's not really grunge, it's classical aligned. It might be bigger and smaller. Bigger and smaller is grunge, yeah? But the alignment could be classical, but a grunge alignment is always off. It's either off to the right or off to the left. It's never aligned either to the right or to the left. It's just off. It's neither to the left, it's neither to the right, it's neither centered. So just one word goes this way and the other word goes this way. And you can even cut the word up. Up front could be, you can say up front. Okay, let's do it in two lines. Up front. And now the next two lines. Now the lines can touch. They even touch. Now I do G, grun. And then I put the GE here.
One of my...
You can separate it wherever you want it. Yeah?
One of my things is what I did. I cut front like completely in half, moved it, and then up was in the middle.
Yeah?
That's how I...
Yeah. So you can cut text. You can even cut the text. So the first thing that then we're looking at spacing. You can cut the spacing. So up front, could the word up could be there, and the front could be just the F and then the RONT. And then you can make the T and the N join into one. And it can be bolder and thinner as you like. Or you can just have one part thick. And then the next thing that we're looking at is font. You can have different fonts. Having different fonts in the headline, you can have a serif font and a sans serif font in the headline. It doesn't matter. So you see how grunge is breaking the rules. Whereas classical is we've got rules, we've got order. Here we got no order. We want to have emotion, we want to have energy, and the way we create it is by different sizes, different spacing in between the letters, even putting the line spacings. And this line spacing variant, you don't have to have it in one line or two lines. You can have 3 lines, you can have split the words. This I'm just going to call it no alignment. Because as soon as you put it on a next line, don't align the text. Give it a no alignment. That's grunge is no alignment. Classical is align left, align right, align center. Grunge is no alignment. Okay? And lastly, so different fonts, spacing, size, and that's about it.
Have the two of you ever done like a proper poster that's been to like Dave Carson's extent of doing?
Yes, but we don't go that far.
That's a bit far.
That's a bit pushing the boundaries. And because our target market might not appreciate it. Like I said, for this laser thing for the hands and the old people, it could work because they are textured, so it could work. Or for material that are textured, we could use it. But we can't push it too far. But if it's extreme sport, we can push it very far. But we got to know how far we push it. But immediately that's noticeable is there will be some texture. And the texture, and remember a brushstroke can also be a texture. A cutout could be a texture. Remember Carson cuts out images and then he places it on top of each other like a collage. So when you're tearing something, if you're going to crop something, let's say you crop something, why didn't you give something a tear instead of just a neat crop? Give it a tear. Because he will take a photograph and tear a piece off. And then he'll place it over another collage. But he does make use of spacing to give it some kind of order. Whereas pop art tends to fill up all the spaces. As long as it's busy. Pop art is busy. Grunge is also busy, but grunge is more aware of placement and spacing and using white space or color space in that sense, or texture. It's got a little bit, whereas pop art will go completely fun and filling up the space and also do bleeds. So here's the last one that I was thinking of, bleed. Pop art bleeds. Remember, classic design won't really bleed something. If you bleed the main image, that's fine, as long as the focus is still on the main image. Whereas pop art will even bleed the heading. It will even bleed the text. Or it will bleed the image on the top or the bottom. So the bleeding and the where he places the focus is different. The focus could be on the side, top, bottom. It's not center, top. It could be varied. Okay, so think of the focus and the bleeds as another way of placing your image and text. So you can place your image and the text away from each other or at the bottom. It doesn't matter where. But they do keep a certain consistency. Like, for example, ray gun. They won't put the ray gun. Ray gun is the name of a magazine, right? So you know that magazines always put Garden and Home, You Magazine. It's always in the top, right? So ray gun won't go put it at the bottom. They'll also put it at the top, but then they'll still vary it. They vary the fonts, they vary the spacing in between the letters, they give it different fonts, they give it maybe different size. There is also no regard for alignment. They could bleed out their heading, but they will still place it in the top half and not the bottom half. But when they come with subheadings, they can put at the bottom. Subheadings, they'll even put skew. Body text, whatever you got to read besides the heading, then they'll start playing around with that. Okay? So that will be grunge. That's how we will be able to notice grunge. So you can look at the design and notice grunge aspects to it. It's not to say that it's so dominant that you're going to... They might only use 20% grunge. But mostly they will use grunge in the texture. Then you know that they're trying to put in grunge. And grunge could also be brush strokes. So think of texture and brush strokes. Because when grunge hardly use script font, but script font lends itself to a brush stroke. So when you think of a brush stroke, you do think of grunge, but it's not a script. But if the text is in like a grunge or brush stroke effects, you can call it grunge. It's not like they used a classical script font. You know what I mean by classical fonts? Classical script fonts is all this fancy fonts.
Aren't you meaning like handwriting?
Yeah, like...
For grunge. More
Yeah.
like handwriting.
You see now, when it's that is classical because it's handwritten smooth, like a font. But grunge will take a brush stroke to make that effect of the script. You know what I'm saying? They'll try and tend to make it look more like a brush stroke. So when you're looking at, and I'm not talking about headings anymore, I want to focus on the picture. But for the headings, it could be, so even if you look at the picture in Grunge, think of the picture, then let's put a few things down for the picture in Grunge. Okay, so if this reflects the text, how would I reflect the picture or the image or the photo? Because mostly what they use photos. The image is usually photos. Okay, so the image equals photos. Seldom do they use drawings. Pop tends to use more drawings, but Grunge tends to use more photos. So the photos tend to be, the photos itself tends to be, I don't want to call it blurred. Let's rather call it out of focus. But out of focus is when something is blurred or out of focus. Okay? Let's say out of focus. The pictures tend to be out of focus, like blurred in the background. The pictures also tend to be the cutout. There's a crop or cutout or a tear, or it could even have a fold. Okay, but I'm thinking now of cropping, cutting out, cropping. How do you crop the picture? So comparing to classical, but when a picture's out of focus or blurred, it's Grunge. Because classic designs, you want to have it in focus. If a picture is cropped awkwardly or a close-up, then it's Grunge.
Would a pixelated image qualify or not really?
Not really. Not really. Because there's a difference between something being pixelated and something being out of focus. Pixelated is when you're so close up that you see blocks. You see what I'm saying? So, yes, you could, but then you don't want to see blocks and then not know what it is that they are showing.
Maybe one could use that pixelated image as a texture and then maybe somewhere re-mention the image, but in a more focused way.
Yeah. But when something's pixelated, it means you're so close up to it that you start seeing the dots and you start seeing the pixels. Yeah, but that tends to be also going towards pop art, because pop art is known for its dots close up and its pixelation. Yeah. So but being colorful, you won't really see Grunge images very close up, but you will definitely see it cropped. You know what I'm saying? It'll be awkwardly cropped or awkwardly skewed, but you won't go so close up to it that you'll start seeing the pixels. It'll be a blur, but you won't see specific pixels or seeing it too close up. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so that is the cutout, the crop, the way you do that, and the out of focus. And also in terms of the color tends to be earthy or dark. And it's not always, because if you compare his surfing magazines, it was very light because of the sea. But if you compare his musician, Grunge, Nirvana, it's very dark because they were in these dark clubs. So it depends on the subject matter. But mostly when you're talking about texture, it's the earthy textures and the dark textures of the dirty colors. So I'm going to call it earthy and dark, just because it lends itself more to that. Because he is mostly got famous for, not for his surfing magazines, he got famous for his musicians, the work he did for musicians, and Nirvana and all the grunge people of the 90s. Okay. And then also, look, the cutout, I'm also going to say cut out, crop, and look at the edges of the picture. The edges could be textured or cut out or torn or brush stroked. Yeah?
Would splatter and spray also qualify?
Yes, but that would be then qualifying more for the background than the image.
Yeah, but even like sometimes with that ink, and the way the ink runs.
And then they put the picture in the ink. Yes. If you got an ink background and you put the picture in the ink, yes. Because then you're talking about the edge.
Sometimes you get that ink, instead of doing a brush stroke, you're writing with ink.
Yeah. But now
And
you,
it's
yeah,
like
but we're going to be careful that you don't confuse it with being the image and being the background, okay? Because ink splatters, you are focusing more about the background texture and the background, whereas a picture, there's a certain picture in there. It's just how you handle the edge of the picture or the crop of the picture, but you still see the picture. Whether the picture is blurred, you can still make it out, or whether the subject matter of the picture is skewed, you still see the picture, okay? So these are the types of things I'm thinking of in the picture. But this out of focus, immediately anything out of focus is grunge. Immediately anything where the edges are cut or cropped awkwardly or skewed, it's grunge. So it's how you treat the cutout, how you treat the crop. Because a cutout can be, if you have a picture and you're cutting out the background, you tend to see it as a cutout or deep edged. So something can be cut out. He cuts out the photograph of David Carson, just cutting out his body with no background. That's a cutout. We call it deep etching in art terms. So a cutout or a crop means just how do you crop the edge or how do you crop the image. So if this is the picture of the person, head and shoulders, you might want to crop him there. Cropping means the areas that you choose as important. You see, he could be leaning like this, and it seems like this part is important, and then he can focus on the bottom part, or he can turn something upside down, or he can even cut the part of the way he crops it. He cuts out part of the head. He crops the head away. That's part of cropping, the way he crops it. Then how does he treat the edges? How does he treat the edges of the crop? So maybe the edges, I can see it as another step. In other words, once he's cropped something, how does he treat the edges? Is it a brushstroke edge? Is it a torn edge? Is it a typical picture that you crop that looks either portrait cropped or landscape cropped, or does he crop it out with multiple edges? Or does he throw it into splash marks? The edges become splash marks. And it can be a brush stroke and then it drips and splashes here as part of the background. I'm not talking about the background now, right? Background, I want you to intuitively know what to do with the background. Creating the space and how you create texture in the background. But I want you to focus on the picture and the text. That's going to be the main thing about the communication of the image and the grunge. Not so much the color. Color tends to be earthy colors. Tends to be browns and reds and oranges. He uses a lot of oranges and yellows. And a lot of dark colors. Like dirty colors, earthy colors, ochres, and dark colors. So I don't want to focus so much on colors. But let's see the way we treat a picture. When the edges are torn, when the edges are brushed, torn, brushed, then we know that is grunge. That idea was gotten from grunge. If the picture is dark or out of dark, it's like the levels has been turned up very dark. Not contrast, a lot of contrast. Then it is like, a picture is never meant to be, the shadows got to be like really black shadows and very high highlights. It's like he's pulling it into extremes. The highlights in extremes, the shadows to extremes. So it's earthy and dark. And how do they cut out the image? Or does he crop the image? And how does he handle the cutout and the crop? And then ease things out of focus. And part of the cropping is there might be a group picture. And then he might crop the main guy out and keep the band in the background and crop out the main image, the main person. He's now I'm in the center because I'm the main band leader and here's my two on the side. And now what he does is he crops you and he forgets about the other guy who says come around to the other side. And now there's two and then you cropped as the main person. So he doesn't treat everything classical like we do a group photograph. We just take a photograph and you the main person will crop you in or we'll crop you out. We'll get closer to you, bring you closer if you're the main person. So it's not posed. Images are not posed. So out of focus, I can put here unposed pictures. How's that for a word? Unposed. But it's just taken naturally. Take pictures. And you'll figure out what it is and who's important. Okay, so we're going to do a project for it, but I'll discuss it a bit later. But because grunge tends to be extreme, we're going to try and do music type of projects or extreme sport type of projects or anything. But the subject matter is important. So if you get a client, you've got to treat it classical the most way. But if you think it lends itself to a good texture, then think of texture and grunge and see how you can bring in some of those elements. But remember the 20-80 rule. If it's meant to be classic 80%, then only bring in 20% grunge. Or if you're really meant to be grunge because your target market wants grunge, then do 80% grunge and 20% how you balance out and how you flirt all your other parts of design. Alright, so I've spoken about text, I've spoken about images, I've spoken about what grunge is. I look forward to seeing your grunge projects. Great, thank you very much. Thanks.